7 nannies. 6 months. Every single one of them quit. Some left in the middle of the night without collecting their paychecks. One called the police, refusing to explain what she'd seen. Another checked herself into therapy and signed an NDA just to stop talking about it. When Clara Bennett pulled up to Whitmore Estate for her first day as nanny number 8, she thought the $15,000 monthly salary was the catch. She had no idea, because inside that mansion, a billionaire's wife had died 6 months earlier in what everyone called an accident. But the 7-year-old boy who witnessed it, he hadn't spoken a single word since his mother's body was found at the bottom of the 3rd-floor balcony. And by the time Clara discovered why, 3 people would be dead. $50 million would be missing, and she'd have to choose between exposing a killer or protecting the man she was falling in love with. This is what really happened at Whitmore Estate. And I'm telling you right now, nothing is what it seems. But before we continue, kindly hit the subscribe button and tell us where you are watching from. The wrought iron gates opened with a mechanical groan that sounded like a warning. Clara's beat-up Honda Civic rolled down the pristine driveway, past gardens that probably cost more to maintain than most people earned in a year. In the circular driveway sat a Mercedes S-Class, a Bentley Continental, and a limited edition Porsche that could have funded Clara's student loans 3 times over. She parked next to the Porsche and immediately felt like she'd driven onto the wrong planet. Whitmore Estate loomed before her like something out of a Gothic nightmare. 3 stories of grey stone and dark windows, ivy crawling up the walls like grasping fingers, turrets that belonged in a European castle, not Connecticut. And in the distance, beyond acres of manicured lawns, jagged cliffs dropped away to the Atlantic Ocean. It was beautiful and deeply, profoundly wrong. Clara grabbed her single suitcase, everything she owned fit into one bag, and walked toward the massive oak doors. Before she could knock, they swung open. A woman in her 60s stood in the doorway, silver hair pulled into a severe bun, black dress, simple but expensive. Her face was kind, but her eyes held something Clara couldn't identify. Pity? Fear? "Miss Bennett," the woman said, her voice crisp and professional. "I'm Mrs. Calloway, the estate manager. Welcome to Whitmore Estate." She said, "Welcome," the way someone says, "I'm sorry for your loss." Clara stepped inside, and her breath caught. Marble floors gleamed like mirrors. A crystal chandelier the size of a car hung from the vaulted ceiling. A sweeping double staircase curved upward with ornate iron railings. Oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow her movement. The air smelled of lemon polish, fresh flowers, and secrets. "I'll show you to your room," Mrs. Calloway said, already moving toward the stairs. "Mr. Whitmore is in a meeting. Dinner is at 7. You'll meet him then." "And Noah?" Clara asked, hurrying to keep pace. "The boy I'll be caring for?" Mrs. Calloway stopped on the landing. For a long moment, she didn't answer. "Noah is complicated," she finally said. "He's been through more than any child should endure." "His mother," Clara said softly. She'd done her research. Eleanor Whitmore, age 32, had died 6 months ago in what the news called a tragic accident. The obituary described her as a beloved philanthropist, devoted mother, and heiress to an $800 million pharmaceutical fortune. Mrs. Calloway's expression darkened. Mrs. Whitmore's death devastated Noah. He hasn't spoken since the funeral, not a single word in 6 months. Clara's heart clenched. The job posting didn't mention he was non-verbal. "Would you have applied if it had?" Mrs. Calloway asked, and there was no until judgment in her voice. Just honest curiosity. Before Clara could answer, the older woman opened a heavy wooden door. "This is your room. I hope you last longer than the others, Miss Bennett." The bedroom was stunning. 4-poster bed, antique furniture, windows overlooking rose gardens that seemed to stretch forever. But something about it felt staged, like a beautiful cage. Mrs. Calloway, Clara said quickly before the woman could leave. Why did the other nannies quit? The estate manager's hand tightened on the doorknob. For a moment she seemed to wrestle with how much to reveal. They said the house unsettled them, she finally whispered. That Noah was too difficult. That things happened here that made them uncomfortable. What kind of things? Mrs. Calloway met her eyes. Doors locking from the outside. Footsteps in empty hallways. Personal belongings moved or disappearing. One nanny swore she heard a woman crying in the walls. Another claimed someone had been in her room while she slept, standing at the foot of her bed, watching. Ice water flooded Clara's veins. And you believe them? I believe this house has secrets, Miss Bennet, and I believe those secrets don't want to be found. Mrs. Calloway's voice dropped even lower. 7 nannies in 6 months. The longest one lasted 12 days. Most don't make it past a week. Whatever you do, don't go asking questions about Mrs. Whitmore's death. Don't go looking for answers. Just take care of Noah and keep your head down. And if I can't do that? Mrs. Calloway looked at her with genuine sadness. Then I'll be hiring nanny number 9 very soon. She left, her footsteps echoing down the corridor like a countdown. Clara stood alone in the beautiful room, her heart pounding. She walked to the window and looked out at the estate. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the gardens. In the fading light, the rose bushes looked like graves, the hedge maze looked like a trap, and the cliffs in the distance looked like the perfect place to stage an accident. She started unpacking, trying to calm her racing thoughts. $15,000 a month. That was life-changing money. She could pay off her loans, start over, build a future. She just had to last longer than 2 weeks. Clara was hanging clothes in the massive wardrobe when she felt it, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. She turned slowly. A small figure stood in her doorway, perfectly still, silhouetted against the hallway light. Noah. He was tiny for 7 years old, thin, like he hadn't been eating properly, dark hair that needed cutting. He wore expensive clothes, a designer sweater and tailored pants, but they hung loose on his frame. But it was his eyes that made Clara's breath stop. Enormous, dark, ancient. The eyes of someone who'd seen something no child should ever witness. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there, staring at her with an intensity that was profoundly unsettling. "Hello, Noah," Clara said gently, kneeling down to his eye level. "My name is Clara. I'm going to be staying here for a while, taking care of you." Nothing. No reaction. His face was a perfect mask. "I know you've had a lot of nannies lately," Clara continued, keeping her voice soft and non-threatening. "And I know you probably don't want another stranger in your house, but I promise I'm not going to leave like the others did. I'm going to stay." For just a moment, something flickered in Noah's eyes. Disbelief, hope, warning. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away. His small footsteps echoed down the hallway, getting fainter and fainter until Clara heard a door close somewhere in the distance. She stood up, her hands trembling slightly. That child had seen something. She was certain of it. Clara finished unpacking and checked her phone. 2 hours until dinner. She decided to explore the house, get her bearings. The mansion was a labyrinth, endless. Hallways lined with closed doors. A library with floor-to-ceiling books that looked like they'd never been touched. A ballroom with a grand piano covered in a white sheet. A conservatory filled with exotic plants that probably cost more than cars. Everything was immaculate, perfect, lifeless. And everywhere Clara looked, she saw photographs of Elena Whitmore. The dead woman had been breathtaking. Long dark hair, warm brown eyes, a smile that looked genuine, not the practiced expression of someone used to cameras. In every photo, she looked happy, vibrant, alive. In one frame, she held a baby Noah, both of them laughing. In another, she stood with a tall, handsome man, Ethan Whitmore presumably, at some charity gala. In a third, she sat in the rose garden, reading a book, completely at peace. Clara couldn't shake the feeling that Eleanor Whitmore was still here somehow, watching, waiting. She was examining a portrait in the main hallway when a voice behind her made her jump. She was beautiful, wasn't she? Clara spun around. A woman stood at the top of the staircase, and Clara's first thought was, predator, late 20s. Platinum blonde hair in perfect waves, a cream designer dress that probably cost 5 figures, Louboutin heels, diamond jewelry that caught the light like captured stars. But it was her eyes that sent warning signals screaming through Clara's brain. Cold, calculating, Arctic blue. The woman descended the stairs with the confidence of someone who owned the place, her gaze travelling over Clara like she was assessing merchandise. "You must be the new Nanny," the woman said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Number 8, isn't it? Or have I lost count?" "I'm Clara Bennett, Victoria Ashford." She extended a perfectly manicured hand, but when Clara shook it, Victoria's grip was just a fraction too tight. A power play. "I'm Ethan's business partner. I've been staying here since the tragedy, helping manage the company. Transition. Someone has to keep things running while Ethan grieves." The way she said grieves made it sound like a weakness. Victoria circled Clara slowly, examining her from every angle. "You look sturdier than the last few. Maybe you'll actually last a week, though I wouldn't bet on it." "Why did the others leave?" Clara asked directly. Victoria's smile sharpened. "Because they were smart enough to recognize when they were in over their heads. This house—" She gestured elegantly at the opulent surroundings. "It has a way of being unkind to outsiders, especially those who ask too many questions." "Is that a warning?" Clara asked. "Consider it friendly advice." Victoria stepped closer, her voice dropping. "Elena Whitmore died in a terrible accident, tragic but simple. She'd been drinking, lost her balance on the third-floor balcony and fell. The police investigated, found no evidence of foul play and closed the case. End of story." "Then why are you telling me this?" Clara asked again. Victoria's eyes glittered dangerously. "Because 7 nannies couldn't leave well enough alone. They started snooping, asking questions, making poor Noah's delusions worse. And it ended badly for all of them." "Ended badly how?" "They left." Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Sometimes in the middle of the night, sometimes after accidents of their own. Nothing serious, just enough to convince them this wasn't the right position." "I'd hate to see the same thing happen to you, Clara." It was absolutely a threat. Before Clara could respond, a door opened somewhere below, and a deep male voice called out, "Victoria, are the Tokyo contracts ready for review?" Victoria's entire demeanor shifted. Her voice became warm, almost intimate. "In your study, darling. I'll be right there." She turned back to Clara, and her mask of false friendliness slipped back into place. "Dinner is at 7. Don't be late. Ethan hates tardiness." She walked away, her heels clicking on the marble like a countdown. Clara stood alone in the hallway, her heart racing. 7 nannies. All gone. A dead woman whose accident was too convenient. A traumatized child who hadn't spoken in 6 months. And a woman who was clearly much more than just a business partner, making thinly veiled threats before Clara had even unpacked. Every instinct screamed at Clara to pack her bag and leave. But then she thought of Noah's ancient eyes. That little boy was trapped in this house with whatever secrets it held, and $15,000 a month would change her life. Clara walked back to her room as the sun set completely, plunging the estate into darkness. She locked her door. Then she checked the lock 3 times. Somewhere in the distance she could have sworn she heard a child crying. But when she opened her door to check, the hallway was empty. Silent. Waiting. The game had begun. And Clara didn't even know the rules yet. She locked her door. Then she checked the lock 3 times. She was being paranoid. Letting Victoria's threats and Mrs. Calloway's warnings get to her. This was just a job. A traumatized kid in a big house with a tragic past. Nothing supernatural. Nothing sinister. Clara changed into her pajamas and was about to climb into bed when she noticed it. The antique wardrobe door was slightly ajar. She'd closed it. She was certain she'd closed it. Her heart began to pound. Then she walked over and pulled it open. Her clothes hung exactly where she'd left them. Nothing was disturbed. She was being ridiculous. Then she saw it, hidden behind her suitcase, tucked into the back corner of the wardrobe, where she never would have looked unless something had moved. A leather journal. Worn. Water-stained. The edges of the pages rippled like it had been soaked and dried. Clara pulled it out with trembling hands. The cover was embossed with gold initials. E.W. Elena Whitmore, the dead woman's diary, was in Clara's room. She opened it to the first page. Elena's handwriting was elegant, precise. If you're reading this, I'm already dead, and you need to know. It wasn't an accident. Someone in this house is going to kill me. I know who. I know why. And I know I can't stop it. Clara's hands shook so badly she almost dropped the journal. But if you're the one who finds this diary, you're in danger too, because the person who murdered me, they're still in this house. They're watching, and they'll do anything to keep their secret buried. Clara flipped frantically through the pages. Dates, names, financial records, photos tucked between entries. And on the last page, Elena ever wrote, circled in red ink, "Victoria knows. She's helping him. Don't trust." The entry stopped mid-sentence, like Elena had been interrupted, or killed before she could finish. Clara's door handle rattled. She froze. Someone was trying to get in. Clara's door handle rattled. She froze. The diary clutched against her chest. Someone was trying to get in. The handle turned slowly, deliberately, testing the lock. Then stopped. Then there was silence. Clara held her breath, listening so hard her ears rang. Footsteps, moving away down the hallway, slow, measured, like whoever it was wanted her to hear them leave. She waited 5 full minutes before she dared to move. When she finally crept to the door and pressed her ear against it, she heard nothing. The hallway was silent. Clara looked down at the diary in her hands. Elena Whitmore's final words stared up at her. Victoria knows. She's helping him. Don't trust. Helping who? Trust who? And how the hell did this diary end up hidden in Clara's wardrobe? She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking, and opened to the first entry. It was dated 8 months ago, 2 months before Elena's death. April 3rd. I found the first discrepancy today, a transfer of $2.3 million to an offshore account in the Caymans. Ethan says it's a legitimate business expense, but when I asked to see the corresponding contracts, he changed the subject. I'm probably being paranoid. Marriage makes you suspicious of shadows. But something felt wrong about how quickly he shut down the conversation. I'll let it go. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation. Clara flipped ahead. The entries became darker. April 28th. Found 3 more transfers, all to the same account. Total, $8.7 million in the last 2 months. When I confronted Ethan, he got angry. Actually angry. He's never raised his voice to me before. He said I was overstepping, that the company finances were his domain, not mine, that I should focus on being a mother and let him handle business. It felt like talking to a stranger. May 15th. I hired a forensic accountant, someone Ethan doesn't know, someone who can look at the books without tipping him off. I'm terrified of what they'll find, but I'm more terrified of what it means if I'm right. June 2nd. The accountant called. He sounded scared. Over $50 million has been moved out of Whitmore Pharmaceuticals in the last year. Systematically, carefully. Someone's been bleeding the company dry and covering their tracks with falsified records. When I asked who had access to make these transfers, he gave me 2 names. Ethan Whitmore. Victoria Ashford. I confronted Ethan tonight. He denied everything, said the accountant was incompetent, that I was being hysterical. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. You need to drop this, Elena, for Noah's sake. Was that a threat? Clara's heart was pounding. She flipped faster, scanning entries. June 18th. Victoria came to the house today while Ethan was in Tokyo. She sat in my kitchen, drank my coffee, and told me I was making a mistake. She said if I went public with unfounded accusations, I'd destroy everything. The company, Ethan's reputation, Noah's future. I told her I had proof. She smiled, actually smiled. And then she said, proof can disappear, Elena, so can people. July 1st. I've made copies of everything. Bank records, transfer receipts, email correspondence. I've hidden them where Ethan and Victoria will never find them. I've also changed my will. If anything happens to me, Noah inherits my shares of the company, not Ethan. He'll need a legal guardian to manage them until he's 18. I've a sister, Margaret. She lives in Boston. She'll take care of Noah if… God, I can't even write it. If something happens to me. July 20th. Things are escalating. Someone's been in my room, going through my things. I know because I leave subtle markers. A book at a specific angle, a drawer slightly open. They keep moving. Ethan says I'm being paranoid. That, grief over my mother's death last year, is making me unstable. But I know what I know. They're looking for the evidence. August 10th. I tried to leave today, packed a bag for Noah and me, called Margaret to say we were coming. Ethan found out, I don't know how. He took my car keys, my credit cards, my phone. He says it's for my own protection, that I'm having a breakdown, that I need rest. Victoria was there, standing in the doorway, watching, smiling. I'm trapped in my own house. August 25th. I overheard them tonight, Ethan and Victoria in his study. Victoria said, we're running out of time. The board is getting suspicious. We need to execute the final transfer before anyone else starts asking questions. Ethan. And Elena. Victoria. She's a problem that needs to be solved, permanently. I'm writing this from Noah's room. He's asleep. He has no idea what's happening. I've hidden the evidence in a place they'll never think to look. If you're reading this, you need to find it. It's the only thing that can prove what they've done. The hiding place is… The entry stopped. The next page was torn out, ripped violently from the binding, leaving only jagged edges. Clara's hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold the diary. Eleanor Whitmore had known she was going to be murdered. She'd documented everything. She'd hidden proof of a $50 million embezzlement scheme. And then she'd, accidentally, fallen off a balcony. Clara flipped to the final entry. Written the day before Elena died. September 3rd. Tomorrow night, Ethan is hosting a dinner party. Business associates, board members. Victoria will be there. I've decided to go public. I'm going to announce what they've done in front of everyone. They can't kill me in a room full of witnesses. If you're reading this, it means I didn't survive. It means they got to me first. Please, find the evidence. Protect Noah. Don't let them get away with this. And whatever you do, don't trust anyone in this house. Victoria knows. She's helping him. Don't trust… The sentence ended there, like Elena had been interrupted, like someone had walked in. Clara closed the diary, her mind racing. Elena Whitmore was murdered. That much was clear. Ethan and Victoria had stolen $50 million from the company and killed Elena to cover it up. But where was the evidence Elena had hidden? And more importantly, who had put this diary in Clara's wardrobe? Someone wanted her to find it. But who? And why now, 6 months after Elena's death? Clara looked at the clock. 6:47 p.m., 13 minutes until dinner. She had two choices. She could pack her bag and leave right now, or she could stay and figure out what really happened. $15,000 a month. A murdered woman who deserved justice. A traumatized child who'd witnessed his mother's death and couldn't speak about it. Clara hid the diary under her mattress and changed for dinner. She was staying, but she wasn't stupid. She took a photo of every page of the diary with her phone and uploaded them to a cloud storage account. If something happened to the physical diary, or to her, the evidence would survive. Then she went downstairs to have dinner with a murderer. The dining room was magnificent and terrifying, a table that could seat 20 people. Crystal chandeliers, oil paintings of dead Whitmores watching from the walls, silver candlesticks that probably cost more than Clara's college education. And at the head of the table sat Ethan Whitmore. He was younger than Clara expected, mid-30s, tall, athletic build, dark hair starting to silver at the temples, expensive suit that fit perfectly, handsome in that effortless way rich people always seem to be. But his eyes were what caught Clara's attention. Empty, like looking into a well where something had died at the bottom. "Miss Bennet," he said, standing as she entered. His voice was smooth, cultured. "I apologize for not greeting you when you arrived. Business called me away. I'm Ethan Whitmore." He extended his hand. Clara shook it, fighting the urge to recoil. This man had murdered his wife. She was certain of it. "Please, sit." Ethan gestured to the chair at his right. Victoria sat across from Clara, already sipping wine, watching her with those cold blue eyes. "Where's Noah?" Clara asked. "He eats in his room," Ethan said dismissively. "He's more comfortable there. Mrs. Calloway brings him his meals." "Shouldn't he eat with family?" Clara pressed. "It might help him." "I appreciate your input, Miss Bennet," Ethan cut her off smoothly. "But I know my son. He's not ready for social interaction yet." Noah knows what happened, and Ethan's trying to keep him quiet. That's the part Clara isn't aware of. A staff member Clara hadn't met before, a young man in a crisp uniform, began serving the first course. Some kind of soup that probably had a French name and cost $100 a bowl. "So," Ethan said, cutting into the silence, "Mrs. Calloway tells me you have a degree in child psychology. That's quite impressive." Clara forced a smile. "I wanted to help children who've been through trauma." "How noble," Victoria's voice dripped with sarcasm. "And is that why you've taken a position as a glorified babysitter, helping traumatized children?" "Victoria," Ethan said mildly. "I'm just curious about our new nanny's motivations," Victoria continued, her eyes locked on Clara. 7 others have quit in 6 months. What makes you think you'll be different?" "Maybe I'm more stubborn," Clara said evenly. Victoria's smile sharpened. "Stubbornness can be dangerous, especially when you don't understand the full situation." "Then perhaps someone should explain the full situation," Clara shot back. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Ethan set down his spoon carefully. "There's nothing to explain. My wife died in a tragic accident. Noah witnessed it and has been traumatized into selective mutism. Previous nannies found the situation challenging. That's all." "That's all?" Clara kept her voice innocent. "Mrs. Calloway mentioned the nannies experienced some unusual things. Doors locking, items disappearing. One even claimed someone stood at the foot of her bed while she slept." Victoria laughed. It sounded like breaking glass. "Old houses make noises, Miss Bennet. Pipes settle, floorboards creak. Overactive imaginations see monsters in shadows." "And the locked doors?" Clara asked. "Faulty mechanisms," Ethan said smoothly. "This estate is over 100 years old. Things malfunction." "What about the nanny who called the police?" Clara asked. Ethan's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those dead eyes. Anger, fear. "That woman was mentally unstable," Victoria said. "She claimed she saw Eleanor's ghost. Can you imagine? A grown woman, terrified by her own delusions." "Maybe she saw something real," Clara suggested quietly. "Maybe something that made her afraid enough to run." The silence that followed was suffocating. Ethan carefully wiped his mouth with his napkin. When he spoke, his voice was soft, dangerous. "Miss Bennet, I'm going to give you the same advice I gave the previous nannies. Your job is to care for Noah, not to investigate my wife's death, not to listen to gossip from paranoid women, not to ask questions about things that don't concern you." "And if I do," Clara asked, "then I'll have no choice but to terminate your employment." Ethan's smile didn't reach his eyes. I'd hate to lose another nanny so quickly. The turnover is becoming inconvenient. It was absolutely a threat. Clara met his gaze and didn't look away. I understand, Mr. Whitmore. Excellent. Ethan's mask of civility slid back into place. Now, let's discuss Noah's routine. He wakes at 7, breakfast in his room, lessons from 9 to noon. Mrs. Calloway has the curriculum. Lunch, quiet time, dinner, bed by 8. He doesn't go outside, Clara asked. Fresh air, exercise? The grounds make him anxious, Ethan said. He prefers to stay indoors. This means Ethan doesn't want Noah anywhere near the balcony where Elena died. They finished dinner in tense silence. Clara barely tasted the food. She was too busy watching Ethan and Victoria. The way they looked at each other when they thought Clara wasn't paying attention. The way Victoria's hand brushed Ethan's shoulder as she passed his chair. The way Ethan's expression softened when he spoke to Victoria in a way it never had when he'd mentioned his dead wife. They were lovers. Clara was certain of it. Elena Whitmore had been murdered by her husband and his mistress for $50 million. And somehow Clara had to prove it. After dinner, Clara excused herself and went straight to Noah's room. She knocked softly. No answer. Noah, it's Clara. Can I come in? Silence. She opened the door carefully. Noah's room was enormous. Toys that had never been played with. Books that looked untouched. A bed shaped like a race car. Everything a child could want. And absolutely no warmth. It felt like a showroom. A display of what a child's room should look like, designed by someone who'd never met an actual child. Noah sat in the corner, knees pulled to his chest, staring at nothing. Clara's heart broke. She crossed the room slowly and sat down on the floor a few feet away from him. Not too close, giving him space. I know you don't want to talk, she said softly. And that's okay. You don't have to say anything. Recognition, fear, hope. I know what happened to her, Clara whispered. I know it wasn't an accident. And I know you saw something that night. Noah's hands were shaking. I'm going to find out the truth, Clara continued. I'm going to prove what they did, but I need your help, Noah. Can you help me? For a long, terrible moment, Noah just stared at her. Then, slowly, he nodded. It was the first response he'd given anyone in 6 months. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you. Noah stood up, walked to his bookshelf, and pulled out a copy of Where the Wild Things Are. He handed it to Clara. She opened it, confused. Then she saw what Noah had done. Every page had been drawn on. Crude crayon drawings over the printed illustrations. A woman falling from a balcony. A man and a woman watching from below. A little boy hiding behind a door, watching everything. And on the final page, drawn in shaky red crayon, they pushed her. Clara looked up at Noah. Tears were streaming down his small face. Oh, sweetheart, she whispered. Noah pointed at the drawing. Then he pointed down, toward where Ethan and Victoria were probably still in the dining room. He was telling her who the murderers were. Before Clara could respond, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Noah's eyes went wide with terror. He grabbed the book from Clara's hands and shoved it back on the shelf, then ran to his bed and dove under the covers. The door opened. Mrs. Calloway stood in the doorway, her expression grave. Mr. Whitmore requests that you don't spend time alone with Noah, she said quietly. He thinks it might be overwhelming for the boy. What Clara doesn't know is that Ethan doesn't want her talking to Noah unsupervised. Of course, Clara said, standing. I was just saying good night. She looked back at Noah, who was pretending to sleep. But through his blankets, she saw his small hand form a thumbs up. He was on her side. Clara had an ally. Now she just had to keep them both alive long enough to expose the truth. Clara didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through everything she'd learned. Elena Whitmore had hidden $50 million in evidence somewhere in this estate. Evidence that would prove Ethan and Victoria had systematically embezzled from Whitmore Pharmaceuticals. Evidence that would prove murder. But where? Clara sat up, pulled out her phone, and scrolled through the photos she'd taken of the diary entries. She read them again, slowly, looking for clues. Then she saw it. In the entry from July 20th. Someone's been in my room, going through my things. I know because I leave subtle markers. A book at a specific angle, a drawer slightly open. Elena had been meticulous, observant. She'd noticed when things were moved even slightly. That kind of person wouldn't hide evidence somewhere random. She'd hide it somewhere meaningful. Somewhere connected to Noah. Somewhere that would eventually lead back to him if something happened to her. Clara thought about Noah's room, the untouched toys, the pristine books, the sterile perfection of it all, everything except one book. Where the Wild Things Are. The book Noah had shown her, the one with his drawings of his mother's murder. Clara's heart started pounding. What if that wasn't the only thing hidden in Noah's room? She checked the time. 2:47 a.m. The estate was silent. Clara slipped out of bed, grabbed her phone for light, and crept into the hallway. The mansion was different at night. Shadows stretched longer. The portraits on the walls seemed to watch her move. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a gunshot. She made it to Noah's room and opened the door as quietly as possible. Noah was asleep, his small body curled under the covers. Clara felt a pang of guilt for invading his space, but this was too important. She went straight to the bookshelf. Dozens of books, all perfectly arranged, all looking untouched except for Where the Wild Things Are. Clara ran her fingers along the spines, looking for anything unusual. Nothing. She checked behind the bookshelf, under it, between the books. Nothing. Frustrated, Clara sat back on her heels. Think. Where would Elena hide evidence in her son's room that Ethan wouldn't find? Then it hit her. The race car bed. Clara crossed to Noah's bed. He was sound asleep, his breathing soft and even. She carefully lifted the mattress just a few inches, trying not to disturb him. At first she saw nothing, just the bed frame. Then she noticed it. A seam in the wood, too precise to be natural, like the base of the bed had been modified. Clara's hands were shaking as she felt along the edge. Her fingers found a small indentation, a hidden latch. She pressed it. Click! A panel in the bed frame popped open. Inside was a USB drive. Clara grabbed it, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might wake Noah. She closed the panel, lowered the mattress, and stood up. 5. She'd found it. Elena Whitmore's evidence. $50 million in stolen money, proof of embezzlement, proof of conspiracy, proof of murder. Clara clutched the USB drive in her fist. As she turned to leave, she found Victoria Ashford standing in the doorway. Clara's blood turned to ice. Victoria stood perfectly still, backlit by the hallway light, wearing a silk robe. Her blonde hair was down, cascading over her shoulders. She looked like a ghost. Couldn't sleep. Victoria's voice was soft, dangerous. Clara's mind raced. The USB drive was in her hand, but Victoria couldn't see it in the darkness. Not yet. I heard a noise, Clara lied. I came to check on Noah. Victoria stepped into the room. How thoughtful. You're very dedicated to your job, Miss Bennett. She moved closer. Clara's grip tightened on the USB drive. If Victoria saw it, Clara was dead. Noah's fine, Clara said, keeping her voice steady. I should get back to bed. She moved toward the door. Victoria didn't move. She stood blocking the exit, her cold blue eyes studying Clara's face. You know, Victoria said quietly, you remind me of someone. Who? Clara asked in fear. Elena, Victoria said. The name hung in the air between them like a threat. She was dedicated too, Victoria continued, always asking questions, always digging into things that didn't concern her, always so convinced she knew what was best. I'm just here to take care of Noah, Clara said. Victoria smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. That's what Elena said too. I'm just trying to protect Noah. Right up until she fell off that balcony. The casual way she said it made Clara's skin crawl. That must have been terrible for everyone, Clara said carefully. It was. Victoria took another step closer. Especially for Ethan, losing his wife so suddenly in such a tragic accident. She emphasized the word accident. Clara could feel the USB drive digging into her palm. She kept her hand hidden behind her back. Mrs. Calloway said 7 nannies have quit, Clara said. Why do you think that is? Victoria's smile sharpened. Because they were weak. They couldn't handle the pressure of working in a house where a woman died. They let their imaginations run wild. Or maybe they saw something that scared them. Like what, Miss Bennet? Like the truth. The temperature in the room dropped. Victoria's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Something cold and predatory. Let me give you some advice, Victoria said softly. The same advice I gave the others. This is a good job. Excellent pay, beautiful estate, a child who needs care. You could have a wonderful future here. But only if you remember your place. You're the nanny. Not a detective, not Elena's avenger, just the nanny. Victoria stepped aside, clearing the doorway. Get some sleep, Miss Bennet. You have a long day ahead of you. It was absolutely a threat. Clara walked past Victoria, her heart pounding, the USB drive burning in her clenched fist. She made it back to her room, locked the door, and leaned against it, gasping. That was close. Too close. But she had the evidence. Clara pulled out her laptop and inserted the USB drive with shaking hands. The drive was encrypted. Of course it was. Elena had been careful. Clara tried several passwords. Noah's birthday. Elena's birthday. The wedding anniversary she'd found in one of the diary entries. Nothing worked. She sat back, frustrated. She had the evidence, but she couldn't access it. Then she remembered something from the diary. Elena's entry about changing her will. I've named my sister Margaret. She lives in Boston. Clara opened a new browser tab and searched for Margaret and Elena Whitmore's sister. It took 15 minutes, but she found it. Margaret Chen, living in Boston. A different last name. Elena must have been married before Ethan. Clara found Margaret's Facebook page. It was sparse, mostly private, but there were a few public posts. And in one of them, a photo from 8 months ago. Margaret and Elena together, smiling at a restaurant. The caption read, Sister's Day Out. Love you, Ellie. Ellie. Clara tried it as a password. Access denied. She tried variations. Ellie Chen, Ellie Whitmore, Ellie Margaret. Nothing. Then she thought of Noah, still sleeping peacefully in his race car bed. Then she tried Ellie Noah. The drive unlocked. Clara spent the next 2 hours going through the files. Bank statements, wire transfer records, email correspondence, contracts, falsified invoices. Everything Elena had written about in her diary was here. Meticulously documented. $50 million stolen from Whitmore Pharmaceuticals over the course of 18 months. The money had been transferred to a shell company in the Cayman Islands called Ashford Holdings. Ashford, Victoria's last name. Clara found emails between Ethan and Victoria discussing the transfers, discussing how to hide them, discussing what to do about Elena. One email from Victoria, dated 2 weeks before Elena's death, made Clara's blood run cold. She knows too much. We can't risk her going to the board. You know what needs to be done. Make it look like an accident, balcony, pills, whatever. Just handle it. Ethan's response. I'll take care of it. The dinner party on the 4th. I'll make sure she has too much to drink. Everyone will see her stumbling. When she falls, it'll look like a tragic accident. There it was. Premeditated murder. in writing. Clara's hands were shaking as she copied everything to her cloud storage. Then she made a second backup, then a third. She wasn't taking any chances. But having evidence wasn't enough. She needed to get out of this estate alive and get this to the police. And she needed to protect Noah. If Ethan and Victoria realized Clara had found the USB drive, they'd kill her. And probably Noah too, just to be safe. Clara looked at the clock. 5:23 a.m. The estate would start waking up in less than 2 hours. She had to move fast. Clara went back to Noah's room. He was awake this time, sitting up in bed, watching her with those huge dark eyes. "Noah," Clara whispered, kneeling beside his bed. "I found what your mom hid. The evidence. I know what happened to her." Noah's eyes filled with tears. "I'm going to make sure your dad and Victoria go to jail," Clara continued, "but I need to get you out of here first, somewhere safe. Do you understand?" Noah nodded. "Can you get dressed? We're leaving, right now." Noah scrambled out of bed and started pulling on clothes with shaking hands. Clara grabbed a backpack from his closet and stuffed it with essentials. Clothes, his drawings, the copy of Where the Wild Things Are. She was shoving a jacket into the bag when she heard it. Footsteps in the hallway, coming toward Noah's room. Clara's heart stopped. She looked at Noah. His face had gone white with terror. The footsteps stopped outside the door. The handle began to turn. Clara grabbed Noah's hand and pulled him toward the window. It was a long drop to the ground, but there was a trellis. The door opened. Mrs. Calloway stood in the doorway. For a terrible moment, Clara thought she was caught, that the housekeeper had come to stop them. Then Mrs. Calloway spoke. "If you're planning to leave, you need to go now," she said quietly. "Mr. Whitmore wakes up in 20 minutes. He always checks the security cameras while he has his coffee." Clara stared at her. "You're helping us?" Mrs. Calloway's expression was grim. "I've worked for this family for 30 years. I watched Elena grow from a girl into a woman. I watched her marry that monster, and I watched him kill her." "You knew?" Clara asked, surprised. "I suspected." Mrs. Calloway's voice cracked. "But I had no proof. No one would, believe a housekeeper over Ethan Whitmore, so I stayed silent. And I've regretted it every day since." She stepped into the room and pulled an envelope from her apron pocket. "Elena gave me this the day before she died. She said if anything happened to her, I should give it to someone I trusted, someone who could help Noah." Clara took the envelope. Inside was a letter, written in Elena's handwriting. "To whoever is reading this. If you found my evidence, you know what Ethan and Victoria have done. You know they killed me. Please protect my son. Get him to my sister Margaret in Boston. She has guardianship papers. She'll take care of him. And make sure the world knows the truth. Don't let them get away with this. Thank you for being brave enough to fight for us. Elena Whitmore." Clara looked up at Mrs. Calloway. "Why didn't you give this to the police?" "Because Ethan has half the police department on his payroll," Mrs. Calloway said bitterly. "I needed someone from outside, someone who couldn't be bought." She looked at Clara with fierce intensity. "Can you get Noah to Boston?" "Yes," Clara said without hesitation. "Then go. Now. I'll tell Mr. Whitmore that Noah had a nightmare and you took him for a walk in the gardens. That'll buy you an hour, maybe 2. Clara grabbed the backpack and Noah's hand. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," Mrs. Calloway said. "Just make sure they pay for what they did." Clara and Noah made it to the garage without being seen. Clara's car was still there, parked where she'd left it then. It felt like a lifetime ago. She loaded Noah into the back seat, threw the backpack beside him, and climbed into the driver's seat. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely get the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life. Clara put the car in reverse. And headlights flooded the garage. In the rearview mirror, Noah was clutching his backpack, eyes wide but focused. He gave her that small thumbs up again. They burst through the estate gates just as lights flickered on in the main house. Clara didn't slow down. She drove like a woman possessed, through winding country roads, onto the highway, putting mile after mile between them and that cursed mansion. An hour later, when her hands finally stopped shaking, Clara pulled into a rest stop. She retrieved her laptop and sent everything, every file, every email, every piece of evidence, to Margaret Chen in Boston, the FBI, and 3 major news outlets. She labeled the email, "The Murder of Elena Whitmore." Then she called 911. "I need to report a murder," Clara said, "and I have proof." The trial was a media sensation. Clara sat in the courtroom every single day, watching as prosecutors presented Elena's evidence piece by piece. The bank statements, the emails, the shell companies, $50 million in stolen money, all meticulously documented. Ethan sat stone-faced at the defense table, his expensive lawyers trying desperately to discredit the evidence. But they couldn't. Elena had been too thorough, too careful, too smart. When the prosecution played Ethan's email, "Make it look like an accident, balcony, pills, whatever, just handle it." The courtroom went silent. Several jurors were crying. Victoria tried to claim she'd been manipulated, that she didn't know Ethan would actually kill Elena, but her own emails destroyed that defense. The verdict came on a cold November afternoon. Ethan Whitmore, guilty of first-degree murder, embezzlement, fraud. Victoria Ashford, guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, embezzlement, fraud. Both were sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted in applause. Clara felt tears streaming down her face as Margaret Chen, who looked so much like her sister, squeezed her hand. Beside them, Noah sat quietly, watching his father being led away in handcuffs. He didn't look sad. He looked free. That evening, back at Margaret's apartment in Boston, Noah sat on the couch between Clara and his aunt. He was drawing, something he'd started doing again in therapy. This picture showed 3 people holding hands. A woman labeled Aunt Maggie, a boy labeled Me, and another woman labeled Clara. Above them, sketched in careful detail, was a 4th figure, an angel with long dark hair and kind eyes, labeled Mom, watching over us. Margaret saw it and started crying. Noah looked up at both of them, and then he did something miraculous. He spoke. For the first time since his mother's death, Noah spoke. "She would have liked you," he said to Clara, his voice small but clear. "Mom, she would have said you were brave." Clara couldn't speak. She just pulled him into a hug, while Margaret wrapped her arms around both of them. They stayed like that for a long time, this makeshift family built from tragedy and truth. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall over Boston. Inside, 3 people who'd survived the darkness finally found light. Noah was safe. Elena's killers were behind bars. And the truth Elena had died protecting, had exposed the monsters hiding behind their mansion walls. The nightmare was over. But the healing had just begun. And together, Clara, Margaret, and Noah, they would face whatever came next. As a family. If you enjoyed this episode, like, comment, and subscribe for more. Don't forget to hit the bell icon to stay updated. Share the story with friends and join us for more stories.